On Monday, the NAACP is holding another day of action at the Alabama offices of Senator Jeff Sessions to protest the nominee for U.S. Attorney General ahead of his confirmation hearings scheduled for Tuesday and Wednesday.
I don't think his approval confirmation is going to go as smoothly as he thinks. I think there are a lot of people, senators, that are questioned. They may not be speaking out saying that they're not concerned about him, but I think there are enough that will somewhat put a wrinkle in the process.
Sessions is one of 7 confirmations scheduled for this week, including 5 on Wednesday alone, which has prompted the head of the Office of Government Ethics to express, quote, great concern that Trump and the GOP are rushing through cabinet confirmations without the adequate time to complete ethics reviews. We spoke to NAACP Alabama President Bernard Simulton, one of 6 civil rights leaders arrested for a sit-in at Jeff Sessions' office last week on January 2nd. Simulton says the NAACP still has concerns about the accusations of racism leveled at Sessions after he was nominated to a federal judgeship by Ronald Reagan in 1986. The accusations prompted a Republican-controlled Senate panel to reject his confirmation.
Some of the comments that he made back then was calling one of his assistant attorneys boy. That, especially during that time and even as of today, that's known as a racial term, especially in a professional setting like that. You can't call another, wasn't his co-equal, but this individual, Thomas Figures, well-educated person. He worked for Senator Sessions, so Senator Sessions thought that he, had that kind of power over him where he could call him boy. And so that's the first reason. The second reason is, he referred to the NAACP as being un-American, and because of these things that we did, because we were fighting for voting rights for everyone, because we were had fought the voter education, because we were fighting the injustices that we saw that were inflicted on people here in the state of Alabama as well as across the nation. He wanted to call the NAACP un-American. And then when we move on to later in his career, up until recent years, since he has been elected senator, and because of his opposition that he stated on things like immigration, his opposition to the Voting Rights Act, expansion of the Voting Rights Act, signaled to us that he still has not changed. He has changed his language, but his deep down feelings has not changed, and he just is not suitable to be the Attorney General for the United States.
Along with the accusations of racism, the 1986 hearing also highlighted how Sessions accused civil rights activists of voting fraud in a case where the defendants were found not guilty. Here's a news report from the time.
His biggest problem came in a case he prosecuted and lost, a vote fraud case involving black civil rights leaders in Perry County, Alabama. Defendants in the Perry County case were Albert and Evelyn Turner, political and civil rights leaders for more than 20 years. Albert was an aide to Martin Luther King. Their scrapbook has all the marches.
This is Bloody Sunday. Albert conceived, that's him right there.
Albert Turner guided the mules at Dr. King's funeral. The federal government charged the Turners with doctoring absentee ballots, vote fraud, and mail fraud.
My own opinion is that the case was political. I actually don't think Jeff Sessions came in with an ounce of evidence.
He rounded up some individuals who the Turners had helped, and somehow he convinced them to say that the Turners, marked their ballot incorrectly, or that they changed their ballots or what they thought they had. And I think there were maybe 5 or 6, and to try and prosecute someone, and they faced up to, I think it was 100-some years in prison for what they were charged with, federal charges. I mean, that's absolutely ridiculous when all they were doing was trying to help people register to vote and to cast their vote, absentee ballots, just like so many others had done. And whites at that time were doing the same thing.
This is Gerald Hebert, a former colleague of Jeff Sessions who provided key testimony in the 1986 hearing.
And what I think that case really shows is that you really find Jeff Sessions lacking the prosecutorial discretion and judgment that really needs to be made by a law enforcement officer at the head of the Justice Department. You have a lot of discretion about what cases to bring and what cases not to bring. And that case should have never been brought. The federal judge who handled it, who was a Reagan appointee, made it clear he didn't think that what the defendants were charged with was a crime and that it was probably First Amendment protected activity, but he let the case go to a trial and a jury anyway, and of course they were acquitted. So what that case did, though, however, was it really sent a chilling effect into the black community in Alabama that if you really engaged in voting activism to help your neighbors vote, and maybe in places where whites for so long were trying to hold on to political power, that you could really face federal prosecution. And, when you face a federal prosecution, it takes a lot of energy away. It takes a lot of time away. These defendants were not young. They were not in their late teens and early 20s. They were veterans of the civil rights movement. And that sends a message across the state.
If he had been successful, this would have deterred organizations like the NAACP from furthering our efforts to vote, to register people to vote and to help, people, do their civic duty. And so that would have a tremendous weight on his part to depress the particular African-American vote.
I wanted to ask you about an article I read from a civil rights attorney who's based in Georgia, sort of critical of the protests against Jeff Sessions. And he's saying his point was, Jeff Sessions needs to be opposed, but he said the NAACP is bringing a knife to a gunfight because, he compared what happened in Alabama to what's happening in North Carolina. Because North Carolina, the Moral Mondays, hundreds of people were coming out and protesting, getting arrested. And his point was, NAACP in Alabama didn't have that critical mass of people to really make an impact as far as the opposing Jeff Sessions. I wanted to get your response to that as well.
I haven't seen the article and I don't know exactly what he says, but I do differ that we didn't have the impact. I think with the numbers that we had across the state, and those 6 that were arrested, and I think even before then, the impact was already felt because, while we were still sitting in his office, there were people calling, CNN was calling, MSNBC was calling, several people were calling to, to ask what was going on, and we were able to tell them. In addition to that, after the arrest, we put an online, another online petition, and within a 24-hour period, from Wednesday to Thursday afternoon, we had over 200,000 signatures of people across the country, opposing Jeff Sessions as the Attorney General. So I don't agree with, again, I haven't seen the article, but I don't agree with his assessment of our impact, and certainly, there is strength in numbers, but I think, we had the right number of people at that time to bring media attention to it, and I think we certainly did that.
Stay tuned to therealnews.com for ongoing coverage of the confirmation of Attorney General Jeff Sessions and all of Trump's cabinet picks. For The Real News, this is Jess Lenore.